at ya, at ya. Tell you what's master, coming at ya, coming at ya. Rhyme style disaster, coming at ya, at ya. Tell you what's master.
I am Wilfred Reilly. Welcome to another episode of Cut the Bull. I'm here with co-host and OG Charles Love, along with the lovely and talented, we'll do Christy Kelly in that direction this time, and the talented and lovely Brooks Crenshaw. It's usually the other way around to emphasize Brooks' loveliness. And we are today talking to Lisa Britton, who is one of the people who from the beginning has played a big role at Evie Magazine, which has of late been getting a large amount of very major media coverage. My fiance actually pointed out the Wall Street Journal piece to me and was described, I think, in the journal as the conservative Cosmo. And Lisa and I have interacted a lot on X, a lot on similar platforms. I think she's talked to Charles and Christy as well. And so there are a lot of questions that come out of that, from modern feminism to men's rights. But the one I wanted to lead with, so Lisa, what does it mean to be the conservative Cosmo? Is that something that's needed, and what's involved in that?
Well, the media, as probably all of us know, is very biased, and they lean mostly more left-leaning. And there's a lot of women out there today who are kind of looking for something a little different. And so Brittany Hugaboom and her husband, they started Evie Magazine as something different, something that isn't too pushy or isn't something that's trying to force people in a certain direction, but offering advice and fashion and even mother advice to women who want something different, who don't want the typical Vogue or even like how 17 magazine was and stuff like that. So they decided 5 years ago to start something fresh and new. And I believe that they were ahead of the curve, and everybody's trying to catch up to them now. And we see it today. Even just today, there is a new wave of backlash against our Gen Z young men. New York Post and The Guardian and others, they posted about a survey that was done in the UK where Gen Z men are twice as likely to say that a woman should obey their man or their husband. So they have been getting a lot of backlash and media coverage today on it. But what they didn't really mention was that also Gen Z and millennial women are also twice as high as boomer women in saying the same thing. So I believe what's happening today, and I don't particularly agree with everything when it comes to some conservative views, but what I think is happening is younger generations of women today, they're seeing that something's wrong, something isn't working. That's been going on over the past few decades. And they're seeking something else. It might be trying to return to a past time, or it might be just trying to seek truth and balance and harmony. But more and more younger women are seeking that today. So I think Evie Magazine is there to fill that void and to give them a modern approach to more wholesome living.
Okay. Now, there are a lot of questions that I could ask there as a long-winded talker, like, do you think modern feminism just hasn't worked? Which I had a long conversation about with some female friends recently. But Charles Love, you're a guy who's been successful in the media for a long period of time. Why does the media in particular, even in comparison to academia, business, why does it slant so insanely far to the left? I mean, every time we poll in academia, we get these figures like 93%. I mean, so obviously, first, your question for Lisa would go next, but why do you think that's the case in the media?
Well, not to disparage your profession, and still Brooks Thunder of the long march through the institutions. I will simplify and say, if you keep telling people to, break the patriarchy, right? And traditions are bad, and the country's bad, and men are bad, toxic even, then, you're gonna, create a generation of then women, late 20s to early 30s, the people who go to college and are successful, who get jobs to run 17 Cosmo, Vogue et al. and they have been, taught that this is the way. A lot of it came from you. You will like to talk about the progression of the different waves of feminism. So this it's a typical human reaction, right? There's something that people perceive as a problem. They're usually partially right, and the correction is usually really bad, right? An overcorrection. So, you know, no women in the workplace, and women couldn't vote, and all these limitations and property rights and things were too extreme. So now it's just, we're all equal. The Angelique commercial from the 70s, right? Bringing home the bacon and frying it up. And, and now, and then that wasn't good enough, right? They went well beyond that. So I just think that after, 3 decades of that, now the people who were broken are now, in charge. That's probably the simple answer.
Fair enough. And do
And
you
I
have,
will ask the question, but I would like to give our guest an opportunity if she wanted to comment on that and give her thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree. All of the, I would say, brainwashing in school. I grew up in the 90s, and in the mid 2000s, I became like a young woman, and I was going through the time when it was girl boss mentality, Beyonce singing Girls Rule the World, and Sheryl Sandberg saying Alina, and all of those things. And it was like your worth came from how successful you could become professionally. Status was important, is important. And I think a lot of women are realizing that we were lied to for a long time.
Hmm.
And we were encouraged to kind of prioritize the wrong things in life. And I'm at the age now, I actually just wrote an essay for the Institute for Family Studies because a lot of my friends, and then I'm in the same camp, we're realizing today that we were encouraged to walk down a path, and now we're kind of all, pretty much every single friend I have is in their mid to late 30s without children. They're single. They have their careers, but they don't have the things that now they're realizing they always truly wanted. So I think that this kind of propaganda machine that's been going on, especially accelerated in the 90s, I believe. I know that in the early 90s, a lot of scholars were saying that they believed we reached true equality, of equal opportunity for women. But then it was basically the feminist lobby doubled down because that's when you realize that it was a business the whole time.
Hmm.
It's a very, very expensive business going on. So they really doubled down in the 90s in elementary schools, future is female messaging, girl power, stuff like that. So now people who are my age are in control of these companies and in control of the media. And now they're perpetuating these myths, of smash the patriarchy and all of these things and promoting a more adversarial relationship between men and women and all of those things. They're basically brainwashed, and now they're just spreading that information still.
Wilford, do I still get to ask my question?
of course, yeah.
I only have three for the whole show, but we could probably do an hour with each
Do them all
question.
now.
So
You can bang them on now.
the first one is that I don't know, like obviously you mentioned earlier you don't agree with all the conservative issues and views, but no one really does.
Yeah.
But obviously you must agree with some or at least be open to them, which is saying a lot for your age group. So I want, and you talk about coming up in the 90s and the 2000s around the time that people were being brainwashed, particularly women. So I wonder first, what made you one start to notice it? I think some people, a lot more people than we think notice it, but like you say, people your age that are halfway down that road, some of them, there's two ways they can go. Some they'll realize that there's an issue and they want to speak out about it. And some may realize it and say, but I'm too far gone and I hate to admit it. So I'm going to, just press on. But you chose to speak out about it, make a shift, speak truth to it. So what made you decide that that was the right thing for you to do? What made you realize it and what made you speak out about it?
I have a lot of compassion for women today who don't agree with what I agree with and who are very left leaning, very feminist, very progressive, because I was one of them. I was living in Los Angeles, I was working in Hollywood, and I would have considered myself a feminist at the time. And I actually left and I went to Tanzania. My brother built a school in Tanzania. So I volunteered there, and my twin and I fundraised for a girls' dorm in the village. So we wanted to help girls in the village who they were like being sold, the students. So we went there and we fundraised, and I was like, yeah, I'm a feminist. And I came back, and a lot of people are saying, why are you helping there when you have to help girls and women here? And I thought my mind was blown that there was a false equivalency between they were saying, well, girls and women need help here, so why are you going over there? And I was like, okay, people are brainwashed because there's issues around the world that we can address, but in no way are girls and women in the West and in America treated poorly. We're encouraged in pretty much every single way today. So that was my first wake up call. And then I started standing up against the female victimhood mentality, I would call it, where women just believed that they were victims. And there was, and so that stemmed into like them saying the patriarchy, men are the root of all of our problems and everything. So I initially started speaking out about that. But then I shifted into the boys and men's and fathers space. A senator's staff member actually said I should write a book on the boy crisis. And I was like, what boy crisis? And I thought she had three heads, you know? I was like, what are you talking about? But I went home and I did a deep dive. This was 8 years ago now. And I realized, wow, there's this huge boy crisis. And my head was just blown. It was like, I realized that something I believed just as fact was not accurate, that it was girls who were behind in every way today, and we needed to only support them, and boys and men have it so good. So I realized right then that if I was wrong about that, which is basically the very belief that everybody has today, what else am I wrong about? So that's when I started shifting into I stand by being nonpartisan. I go to DC a lot. I work with a lot of people, congressmen, and I make sure that I work with everyone. I talk to everyone. I believe that when people check a box, it holds them back from having opinions on a lot of different issues because they feel like, oh, well, I don't agree with that, but I won't say anything because I'm a liberal or I'm a conservative. So I never check a box. So that's where it goes to I don't agree with everything like conservatives say or Republicans do. But there's enough on that side. There's a few things on the other side, and it keeps it very fluid. And that because I think that way now, I'm able to speak to anyone. I can relate to them. I can understand what they're saying, have compassion for them. So I think that if we all did that, then our brains might be a bit more open to even the topics that we talk about at Evie.
Fair enough. All right, Charles may have another one down the road, but I want to bounce over to Christy Kelly, the other female member of the panel. I would sometimes make a dumb joke like I'm assuming, don't want, but we can skip that right now. So Christy, obviously you've talked about a gender sometimes on these shows. You're paired with three fairly bro guys here, which I'm sure is always a very enjoyable experience. But what do you think about some of the points Lisa's raising that you may have dealt with in your own life? How do you balance the distinction between kind of trad wifery, like most women I would assume do want a fairly dominant, at least in his business life, heterosexual man, but you also want to be able to say vote. What are your thoughts on this? Is there a patriarchy? What what are we doing wrong in terms of our takes on men and women? You said you just followed Evie. What do you think about the conversation so far?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, a lot of it tracks, especially as far as kind of being, hoodwinked, right? So I was a teen mom, and but my goals was, yes, I was a mom young, but my goal was always I'm still going to, go to the, university and, go to law school and, get my master's of law because of course education has to be, like this prize. And I think when we're looking back and we're, and I did believe in marriage too, because I think I had that model, from my parents having, been married now for what, almost 50 years they've been married. And so I did have that model, but education is always, up here, especially for Black women. I mean, you hear it all the time, we're the most educated, but then you look at it and you're like, okay, where's the foundation of, marriage and, kids and raising kids, without being in daycare, most of the day, like who's actually raising the kids? I think a lot of those conversations we kind of put on the back burner. And like you, a lot of my friends are, now, I'm a generation older than you, no kids, or maybe they got to their 40s and they decided, I want kids and it's too late at that point, or then they have to go through the IVF. My question is, at what point are we going to see a full scale kind of, wake up moment? Because I always say I randomly spent 5 years in Mississippi, and I can tell you in rural conservative Mississippi, those values of, finding a husband right out of high school or marrying your college sweetheart and maybe the wife kind of supporting him while he pursues his career and then vice versa, having children young in rural America, especially white rural America, you can find more of those traditional values still intact. But when are we going to see kind of the wake up call with women, more of the California where I grew up, more of the urban women kind of waking up and saying, man, we're looking at our mothers and they're all single. We're looking at, these women that are in their 40s and they have a career, but they have no husband or they, have no children or their children are wild and not doing well because they've been raised by daycare. When are we going to see the suburban people kind of wake up?
I think that is part of Evie's mission, and I think it's actually happening today. And I think that's why it's getting the press that it's been getting. Vanity Fair last week did a profile on Evie Magazine and on Brittany Hugboom, the editor and founder. And I read a comment. It was a fairly good profile too, like it wasn't negatively leaning. And I read a comment by somebody on Instagram, and they were like, "This wasn't even a hit piece. They were acting like they were the it girls." And I read the comment and I was like, but maybe this is the it thing right now, like the fact that we're getting this press and it's not negative anymore. A few years ago, Rolling Stone did a hit piece on Evie Magazine, and it was a little worrisome because they set the tone. They said it was basically Cosmo for the far right. So they were trying to frame it as like a very, fringe kind of thing. And I was worried at the time that we weren't going to be able to escape that. A lot of friends of mine who are more left-leaning were like, Lisa, isn't that some sort of crazy right-wing magazine? And I'm like, no, no, no. Like it's just a conservative-leaning women's magazine. So a few years ago, it was kind of rocky what was going on. But now we have Vanity Fair, Wall Street Journal, Vogue is in the works of something right now, and they're kind of viewing it in a more positive direction. And I'm already kind of seeing a little bit of not copying going on, but I think Evie's going to bring some of these magazines along with them a little bit. Like they're going to, I believe my prediction is that over the next year or so, we'll start seeing a bit more of this type of content, even in the more mainstream left-leaning women's magazines. So I feel like a transition is happening now. And it's important to be on top of it and to be spreading truth and to make sure like we're not being too pushy and kind of breaking down the walls even on the conservative side. I think that's important right now because people are craving for something that works.
And that's the day you realize that that Rolling Stone magazine was irrelevant.
Yes, exactly. It was such a horrible, horrible hit piece.
Well,
it was ridiculous.
Those six people were pissed.
You make a good point because, like, I've lived enough of these cycles to understand that your two live crew, right? Like we are Two Live Crew. Like we are the you need a label on the album because it's controversial and the politicians hate it and the mainstream media hates it because it's dangerous. Don't go there. And the kids are like, we want more of that. And that's a part of what's happening.
Except Two Live Crew was bad for the kids.
That's actually
Eve's good for the
funny in
kids.
terms of differences. That just like one quick comment, then Brooks is going to come in with I'd assume a couple questions.
Campbell, that idiot. I'm sorry, go on.
No, but like one thing that I've noticed actually in media is that people who dislike you and might smile in your face will often try to destroy you when you're kind of smaller. And I mean, like, I noticed this a little bit when I had maybe 5,000 followers on social media and so on. Like, everything that was said about me in media was like this right-wing Nazi. And I mean, I'm like a center-right black guy from Chicago. And it's just like, okay, these hacks, whatever. And I mean, it gave me some general tips, like always record your own interviews or, have someone there to do it with you. But beyond that, I didn't really take it all that seriously. It was just sort of, keep publishing books and people will see that what you're doing is actually perfectly normal. So just understanding that your enemy is lying, I think, is you don't question yourself. You're perfectly normal. The things you're saying about relationships have been said for several thousand years in your case. I mean, that's actually extremely important. So that's one quick note. Second, very brief line. Like, I do think in terms of what you and Christy said, I would blame men a little more than you guys seem to be, actually, as a guy. When you ask why aren't upper middle class women kind of accepting the traditional a little bit more, that would depend on a lot of things changing back so that guys also did, started proposing before age 33. I mean, the black community illegitimacy rate wasn't 70%, white community divorce rate wasn't 50%, 30% of guys didn't say they preferred porn to their girlfriend. Like, so I mean, you'd have to talk to the boys a little bit too before people would look at some of these guys and a number of men that can bench press their body weights like 30%. I mean, like, you might need a war or something before there'd be a lot of appeal to some of the fellas out there. But Brooks Crenshaw, you're a happily partnered man who can bench your body weight. You've been waiting patiently for about 25 here. What do you think about this conversation from a man's perspective and overall? Just any questions you really have for the guests, but also your thoughts on the collapse of relationship norms in the USA.
Well, a couple of things that have come up that have I want to cover. You just said something about the men. I agree in some regard, but I also understand that men seek women. That's how we're wired, right? The reason there's a ladies' night at the nightclub and not a men's night is because where the women are, the men will go. And I'll give you an example. When I was in the military, we might have one female in the unit, and you would watch these 5 guys like just morph into whatever it is she wanted, in a potential mate to try to be that guy. And that's kind of, what we do. So whatever is desirable, I would say from a women's perspective, is what young men try to make themselves in some regard. That's part of what we do. I don't necessarily think it's a good thing, and certainly something to be resisted when there's enough pathological.
Not at all to interrupt your piece, but aren't we seeing less of that now, though, between like pornography, the failure of dating? Aren't we seeing guys less try to get strong and wealthy and so on to pick up women and sort of abandoning that?
Well, but when women claim to want simps, but they don't.
Oh yeah, they're just lying. Don't pay any attention to them.
Well, yeah, you say that, but like this is the hard lesson of a young man figuring out what women say they want and what they actually want. Another thing that we covered, we're saying decades and it's generations, right? Like Mary Tyler Moore, One Day at a Time with Bonnie, what's her face, and Murphy Brown. So you've got these single career women. The only man in the show is either the janitor of the building or the housekeeper for Murphy. Like these signals, and I don't have anything against the shows, but like there was definitely a new push for what the future woman is supposed to look like. And my concern here is we're starting to reach a tipping point. I think we're coming back around, and usually when that happens, we go too far in the other direction. Right, we overcorrect, and when the ball's in our court, we screw it up, and then the pendulum swings back. So I guess my question for you, Lisa, is what is the optimal? What does the optimal look like? We had on the left, Simone de Beauvoir said, we can't give women a choice, because if we give women a choice, some of them will choose wrong. Some of them will stay home, and they must be free. And so, what is the proper equilibrium now that we have the ball, right? Where do we go that's not too far?
Well, I believe what we're all actually searching for is a little bit of a shift of priorities back to what's truly important. So I believe that when that shift happened decades ago, it created a competition between men and women. All of a sudden, we were competing against each other for the jobs, for everything else, and that fractured the relationship. And now today, everything's fractured. I believe that basically all of our societal ills in some way stem from the breakdown of a harmonious relationship between men and women. I'm not saying we ever had it right. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like throughout history for millennia, we've never had it right. We need to try to find a balance where men and women aren't the same, and that's a good thing. We value the sexes equally. We don't treat the sexes equally or say that men and women are the same, but we value them equally. And then there's a mutual respect and understanding about a harmonious flow between men and women. So, in my opinion, that stems from just a better understanding of what we're all doing here. I think we're all very distracted and self-focused these days. So we just need more people out there encouraging in the media or in pop culture, like loving relationships. And it's okay if we don't have gender parity in every field. You know what I mean? Like, I actually will shift away from some very conservative leaning people. I think that some areas like politics, for example, I believe representation is important, because when you're sitting at a table making decisions and stuff like that, it's good to have representation from all people. You're representing all people. But when you look at things like, we demand this many CEOs, we demand this many this, we demand, why? If it's causing a fractured relationship between men and women, it's okay if there's a slight gender pay gap because more women, when they become mothers, work less. That's okay, because what's more important, how much money somebody makes or that a child has a loving parent at home? Do you know what I mean? So I think we just all have to shift into a different mindset of our priorities being shifted into more like love, family, life experiences rather than money, cars, status.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The thing about the difference is, a high level career for a man is appealing to women, but a high level career for a woman, men could care less in terms of attractiveness, in terms of what they're pursuing,
What's
typically.
What's very interesting about the study that came out today that everybody's, throwing Gen Z men under the bus for today is that, yes, in this supposed study, 31% of Gen Z men said women should obey men in a relationship, but also 41% of Gen Z men said that they found a woman with a very successful career attractive. And they were like almost twice as high as boomer men saying that. So we're seeing almost like two extremes with Gen Z young men. But the one that made all the headlines this afternoon was the one that made Gen Z men look bad. And the study itself was done by a women's leadership faction of a college, King's Business College in London. So they had like they obviously have motives behind it. Like they want to say, look, see all this patriarchy going on. We need to encourage more women to go into business school. Um, so we are seeing a kind of split between Gen Z men right now. So it's all about trying to find that balance of what works for everyone. And in my opinion, it has less to do with status and stuff and money, and has more to do with like raising the next generation with loving parents.
Yeah. Okay. So it seems like we're starting kind of our next cycle of questions for the guest. And thanks for going through the first one, Lisa. I mean, just I guess for mine, I might just do a comment and then flip to the panel. But I looked at that study that you guys are referencing, and to me, it seemed like a lot of women and not a few men's rights types, like politicizing things that are really just human differences. So like even the comment that something like 20% of men want women to obey them, it wasn't like I want my woman to submit to everything I say. It was like her partners that are generally submissive or something like that. Like, I have to look at the language. But like every adult businesswoman I've ever dated has said they prefer to be generally submissive most of the time. If you're talking about like dancing, sexuality, like who drives, who would fight first if a burglar came through the window, that means like your man is like 10 or 15% more aggressive. It doesn't mean like you are a broken animal. And I don't think that there's a distinction between the men who said, I'd prefer my partner be a sub, and the men who said, I want my partner to be impressive and smart. Like, I think those are probably the same guys. Like, this is just basic
Exactly.
human nature.
That's
So,
why it's so important whenever a big wave of this kind of media, headlines comes out to look at who conducted the survey, who's putting this out right now. And when you realize that it's a woman's leadership institute at a business school, you realize, oh, well, they're trying to get this framing out, and it works every time. I think I saw 10 articles today saying Gen Z men want women to obey, and a scary headline that sounds so demonic and everything. And it makes a lot of sense when you read through everything. It actually seems pretty normal.
I mean, the enjoyably taboo thing you pointed out, which any experienced man or woman knows, is that like a slightly higher percentage of women were like, I sometimes like to obey. Like, I mean, it's not something you would lead with, like, I mean, in a casual meeting, but that's not a surprise to anybody. Anyway, but moving away from this topic, Charles, I mean, you mentioned having, say, 3 or 4 questions earlier. I don't want to talk through the entire panel. What's your next
Well, I'm ready for my next one, but all the conversation has been great. Lisa, you're great. But the last couple of parts made me think about, I really like the back and forth between you and Brooks. And I think both of you were right, but I think that we really need to, I mean, he will correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but highlight, something that a point about the men that's important, leading to what Brooks was saying. So Will said, at some of the point, you two were too nice on the men. We got to blame some of the men. Brooks said, I agree partially, but sometimes men want to be where the women are. And Will's counter also made sense about, some studies and some surveys and a lot of things of Gen Z, where they're moving away, going to porn and things of that nature. But the other side to that is that women are, for all the magazines and all the conversation and about the patriarchy and wanting our rights, women have, and they don't like to say that they had a significant amount of control in certain parts of the relationship, even back when the patriarchy was, large and, shadowing everything. So I think what I liked about where Brooks was going is that what I took from it is that men will do what it takes to get the women,
Yep.
meaning women have more control than they think they do, and when men will kind of conform to. So one example I look at is, because I'm the old guy here. So I remember when guys would dress up to go out on a date. It wasn't because we wanted to wear a collared shirt. It's because the girl that we were interested in would say, "Go away, you look like a bum." So men would kind of battle within the male circle about how they dress, but not for each other. Like women dress for women, but men were also dressing for women, right? So now I noticed I was getting old. I was probably still in my 30s when I would go out and I would look around, and all the women were still dressed to the nine. Nice little, the black dress, you got to have the black dress, the heels on, the makeup, the bag, the whole to do. And the guy was wearing a jersey and jeans.
Or the polo, like the Proud Boys, like Ed Hardy type. Yeah. It's
Right.
gotten
And I'm
bad,
like,
man.
right. So my point, and what I took from what Brooks was saying, which is really important if women want to be treated better and all this kind of stuff, you can dictate how you treat it in a lot of ways. In that, men are bums a lot of time because if you were a certain kind of guy and you couldn't get a girl, you would try to shift because you wanted to get a girl. But now you could be lazy, right? Dismissive, don't text back, don't pick up. Remember, you used to have to go to the door and ring the bell. Now you can honk outside, pull up and honk, and she'll come out. That's not a him problem, that's a you problem. Don't
Well,
come out when he honks.
It's because, but this is the gender wars thing, though, right? Like, I don't want to interrupt before the guest speaks, but like, this is because nobody does shit for each other. So it's like the whole thing of like, well, I ain't gonna cook for you, I ain't gonna sleep with you. I mean, like, if you get used to a climate of, well, I'm gonna do as little as possible, and twice a week we're gonna have mediocre sex, and we're not gonna do anything else that's associated with the marriage, like, yeah, then you're gonna do this type of stuff. And
You're
I think
right. I just still think the woman has more control than the man does.
yes, if women were to, and I think this is part of the thing with Evie, right? And we're going to pass the ball over to Lisa, but like if women were to initiate and say, like, yes, I'm willing to do the things that were associated with an elite relationship that makes us both happy, but I expect you to show up at this time, jacket on. It's going to be a really fun night. Like, yes, of course, guys would definitely do that. It's neither sex is doing that. So, yeah, if a girl's like, I don't know, hey, big head, you want to come over? Something might happen. Yeah, like you're just gonna throw on the old Lakers joint and get in the car. I mean, like it's something. What?
Right. You put up with the other girl. You put up with the more you put up with, the more guys do it. Then he tells his friend, my girl doesn't care if I do this, and it becomes this cyclical thing. But my question is here, because I'll be the bad guy and say the things that no one says you should say. But I'm going to start it with a question, and then at some point I may give you my thoughts. A lot of people, especially men and a lot of people on the right, beat up feminism, and they talk about how bad it is and historically and things of that nature. I'd like to know what they got right. What did the feminists get right?
With that's an interesting question because I've spun around to seeing everything that they got wrong.
At some point, I'm gonna tell you what I think they got right. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But no, what do you think they got right? Everybody had to get something right. Oh no, I'm sorry. Go on.
Well, going back to what I was saying before about the harmonious relationship between men and women, I believe that even back, and this spans back hundreds of years, thousands of years, there wasn't quite the respect of valuing the sexes equally. And that was the issue. And I think where feminism got wrong was they basically said, for a woman to have value, she has to be more like a man. In my opinion, that's the most misogynistic thing you could possibly say. I say all the time, feminists are the most misogynistic people out there. They're basically saying women aren't valuable as women. They have to be like traditional men. They have to be aggressive. They have to, go for the job. If she has any feminine aspects, if she's timid, if she's nurturing, if she wants to stay home and be a mom, she is not a good woman. In my opinion, that's misogyny. That's saying men are better than women. But there was a little bit of like women being almost not treated like a second class, but almost like they were oppressed in certain ways, over the years and everything. And even if you look back at like religious texts and stuff like that, keeping women out of certain fields and stuff. So I don't think we ever quite got the harmonious nature of men and women. But going back to what you're saying about women having all the power, I just posted a couple weeks ago about one time I had a boyfriend and we decided to take dance lessons. And so the instructor was brand new, never taught before. And so he was teaching both of us separately the moves. Then when we got together, he taught both of us the lead steps. So I kept stepping on my boyfriend's feet and I even like tripped and fell over his leg. And it's because we're both stepping the same steps and we fell down. It didn't work. And I can take that story and reflect it onto what's happening with men and women today. And we're both trying to do the lead steps in the dance. And this is a dance, this partnership that we have. So for it to work, there has to be the lead step, and then there has to be the person who's willing to let them lead and go along with it. Throughout history, the men would be the lead, and then women would be letting them take the lead. So a lot of people would put women down as almost like the second and the man at top. But I have a little bit of a different take on it because I believe the ultimate authority is someone choosing to let the other person lead. Because if they don't, then there's chaos. So if I chose, well, I don't want you to lead, I want to lead too, and then we fall over. So women do have a lot of power that they don't quite realize. And throughout history, I don't think was ever respected, because once you realize that basically the ultimate authority is in doing the dance and letting somebody lead, then if you don't do that, that's when chaos erupts. So I believe, like, over the last few centuries, we've all been trying to do the lead dance, and we're seeing chaos. We're seeing the relationships break down, and society's a little bit unstable because of that.
I like to quickly say my other side, and I don't want to be in trouble by myself, so I'm going to talk to Christy. So, Christy, um, I have jokingly said they got nothing right, but Lisa's answer was really important and it helped me out because she talked about respect, and I agree with that. I'm just not sure that the goal of feminism was to bring respect to both sides of the gender ever, even at the beginning, ever, ever. It was never about respect, right? They might have been right about being treated poorly, but the solution wasn't respect, both sides, right? So that's what I mean by in most cases they got most things wrong, is that I think the real solution would have been to allow women to do whatever they wanted to do, to go into these careers, to do all that kind of stuff, like not to bar them from it. But we went too far and got to the point that we encouraged them to. We suggested that they did that. So it's not like they're saying, if you're a single woman, you're widowed, you don't want to get married, you're a lesbian at the time, 70 years ago, and you couldn't marry a woman, go work in the factory. Why not? That's fine, go work in a factory. But they were telling young, able-bodied women who were attracted to men and wanted to be having kids that no, you should go out and do this. Why shouldn't you be able to be an ad exec, a lawyer, run a business, and all that kind of thing? So it's like today, the version of New York today, you get on the subway and they say sex work is work, and and they promote drug use. Now, people might have different views on whether people should be locked up for selling drugs or prostitution, but we can all pretty much agree that we shouldn't be encouraging
Encouraging.
society writ large to do it. And that's what we were doing. We were basically telling all women that you should be on the front lines in the military, you should be in the office, you should be doing this. And I don't think that was best for anyone, which is like you said earlier, where no one's raising their own kids, right? Not even I'm not talking we all go to school age. I'm talking births to 6 weeks to 3 years, right? Because of that. So that can't be good for a society when we push it's like making 90% of the people go to college. More people needed access to college. Yes. Everybody, and at the government's dime, because the best society is if everybody goes to college and learn about Elizabethan basket weaving and as Black women in the 1820s. It's not a benefit. So where am I wrong, Christy? Even though you know I'm not.
I was going to say, I wrote down when you asked that question, agency. I think feminists got it right, that imparting that women can have agency.
Mhm.
You can, I mean, there are some people that we don't want to be mothers. Like, you should never have children, right? Like, that's fine to aspire to. I think feminists got it wrong by not giving
You should
women.
go to the nunnery though. If you don't want that kid, you don't get to work in the office. We have
I,
plenty of places for you.
I,
Restaurants,
We actually only have
nunneries. I mean, there's
I
places.
had two. I had
I,
four. This
they went overboard because they didn't give women the full picture. Like, yeah, aspire to higher education, become a doctor, become a lawyer. But if you wait until 35 to start looking for a husband, first of all, it's going to be this many eligible men, and they're probably not looking for you.
But
So
I'm
I think
magic. Why wouldn't a man want to marry me? I got
that is
5 degrees. I'm magic. I got my own car and house, my own car.
telling women that they can have it all whenever they want it, even if you're 40 and now you're trying to compete with an 18-year-old, is just idiotic. So I think inserting agency, but painting this unrealistic picture of what it's going to be like if you try to have it all. And I have three daughters. That's what I try to impart to them is, okay, first of all, marry young,
Don't get
look in
married.
look in college, look you know, anyways, let me not they get mad when I use them on the show, so let me stop. But
I love
You
getting
should
you in
have
trouble.
them read my latest piece for Evie, because it talks about how they lied to us and the cost was our children.
oh,
So
see.
that was my last piece for Evie Magazine, where I lay out exactly what you just said. So you should definitely get your daughters to read that if
I
you're
sure
encouraging them.
will.
And
So you think it's a problem with a bunch of single 39-year-old women just dropping babies? Like all the babies born to 39-year-old CEOs? That's a bad thing?
The problem might be that that's not going to happen.
it's
There's
not
a
happening exactly.
there's a
Every friend of
famous
mine right
article.
now, I think we're all realizing, wow, we all waited too long. And
Oh,
they that's a you'll see in that piece. And Brad Wilcox from Institute for
Yeah.
Family Studies, he just had a piece 2 weeks ago in Compact magazines telling people to marry young. There's a huge backlash, misogyny, stop telling women when to have babies, all
They
that
could
kind of
say,
stuff.
they could just say
But
no, right?
yeah,
Brad's not coming
exactly.
to their house.
Exactly, right? But
there's a famous
had
article where a guy says that the problem with lying is that it gets exponential. Like you lie, and then people down the road have to lie because of your bullshit. So I mean, like this is, I think, why so many 45-year-old business women keep arguing that men are pedophiles. Like, oh, you're attracted to a 22-year-old dancer, you're a pervert. And I think that ties into this
Uh-oh,
whole
don't get
thing.
Let's
Christy.
not
Christy
start.
thinks every man's a
No, but I
pedophile.
mean,
Don't
this
start.
ties into all. No,
Don't start. We had that episode. They
But
pedophile,
like
Charles. You're a
we did this
pedophile
for a
too.
little bit, guys.
We
But
did
like
have that episode.
the whole point though is that obviously, like if you are, say, 43 and you really want to have kids and you really love a particular guy, and that person's attraction as a successful business guy, somebody who's 22, that's going to cause further tensions without getting into who's right. And a lot of this stuff in our society is caused by the fact that we've been bullshitting people for a really long time. This ties into men too. Like I didn't really have an honest discussion with anyone I was dating about like fertility, a really awkward ass topic till I was like 30, 33. So I mean, it was just something that didn't come up. It wasn't we talked about at dinner. The assumption I think that most professional women had was that things would just work. And as a guy, I mean, it wasn't really something for us. Actually, that kind of is true until your mid 40s. Maybe later, if you look at like Al Pacino and other guys that have decent T
Tony
level.
Randall was like 79 or something.
Yeah, I mean, you got these Italian actors; they're knocking it out. But I mean, like, it's awkward to bring that up, if you want to stay married. So anyway, there are all these issues in society that we have not talked about honestly, and that's had a major impact. Last thing before I just move the questions to other people. One thing, Lisa, that you talked about is the difference between kind of feminism and femininity might be a word. But like throughout history, like unless your partner's an actual rapist or something, yes, of course women have had power. Like they've had far more control over beauty than men have, if you look around the panel, far more control over sexuality. I mean, so like there have been women's organizations, the Weavers Guild, the convents, and so on. So women have had, even under patriarchy, a good chunk of the power in society. What
They
feminists
managed their
are doing-
households. They still had
Yeah.
money.
exactly.
yeah, they had the kids. They controlled. I mean, one thing that in Europe they controlled the poison in the household. So when you ask why weren't men just raping and killing their wives because they wanted to live, they didn't know what all that witch shit was. I mean, so like there are practical reasons why these things happened. But I mean, it is correct that men probably, if you look at the proportion that women had, men had, didn't value that enough. That's a valid feminist point. But to take that and make that a 50-year crusade, that is borders on the irrational. It's totally valid to say men should value female skills more. That I think most men would agree with. But that became female skills have no value. Women should pursue male skills. And that leads into a really irrational zone where men start saying things like, we can be as beautiful as the ladies. And we need 50% female Marine snipers. Like, no, that's not going to work. So, all right. Brooks
Shouldn't
or
we
Chris?
talk about how that hurts women?
Well, Brooks, what's your thought on that, actually? The denial of differences as a question for the guest. I mean, like you were in the military. Is this something that's advocated there or?
For a long time, they just changed this. For a long time, men and women had different physical standards, right? Women had to do X amount of push-ups. Men had to do Y, which is X plus
7.
yeah, X plus Z. And now that's been changed. And I think that's correct in terms of what is required of a military service member. You mentioned something that I think is really important in terms of women having power always. The narrative is that women were oppressed by men and that was a male patriarchy. But the truth is, like, men and women by and large were oppressed. The end. They were oppressed in some ways differently, but through all of that, men and women haven't been at odds. They've been cooperating. Like we got this far through the cooperation between men and women, and the line from the Big Fat Greek Wedding comes to mind, where she says, you know, the man is the head, but the woman is the neck, and she can turn that head any which way she chooses. And there's some truth to that. Not only that, but the sub. You're talking about two different environments historically. You had the men who were fighting the wars, and you had the women that were starting the whisper campaigns and moving they were just two layers of cooperation. So like that's the reason that the queen can move anywhere she wants to on the board, is because she does so in the background, right? The men are on the battlefield. The queen is moving, you know, behind the scenes. And so I think that's an important thing to point out when people buy the narrative that the patriarchy was oppressing women and men were oppressing women. The truth is a tiny substrate of men were oppressing everybody.
And I also always say, if we took a time machine and went back to the olden days and said, "Oh, don't you feel so oppressed?" Women would probably look at us like, "What are you talking about?" Like throughout history, since the dawn of time, men and women worked together to get to the point we're at today. They collaborated so that humanity just didn't survive, but they thrived, they prospered, we've grown to this place that we're at with all this technology and air conditioning, you know. So if you said back then, "Do you feel oppressed?" to a woman at home, she'd be like, "My husband is going out in the mud and the dirt, working all day, slaving, coming home, bringing the resources." I would always joke and say we're viewing what was happening in the past through our modern day lens. So we're looking at it like in the past, the man was like, "Stay in the kitchen, I'm going out to work," like woman. But what if it was more like the woman saying, "Go out and work because I'm like making this home," man, you know, like why are we viewing it through modern day lens of like keeping women inside? Do you see what I mean? Like
Lisa,
jobs weren't always
you're
clean
too
and
nice.
nice.
Let's be real. We are so not oppressed that if you actually you're being too kind. If we really took that time machine back, you would never get to ask that woman if she was oppressed, because we're all so beyond the opposite of oppressed that we wouldn't last a week.
We wouldn't even be able to get there.
You can take them back to the 1500s and make them Henry VIII, and they still would be dead in a week.
Yeah, if you actually went back to the historical old South or Ireland or something, someone would just knock you over the head and sell you in the slave market. Like, I mean, it would be just a completely different style of this. The Bible, like, I mean, people would last like
smallpox. Yeah,
I think that's another problem today too, is that people have completely lost their sense of duty. We don't have gratitude for the luxuries we have today. For us to be complaining, I remember when the war in Ukraine broke out, and I was so mad because that day they banned all men 18 to 60 from leaving the country. So it was like as soon as war knocked on the door, the gender war went right out the window. They all of a sudden gender roles came right back. And whether you agree with that or not is one thing, but the hypocrisy is what bothers me so much. So I remember I posted at the time, I said, I never want to hear anybody complaining about manspreading ever again, because it just shows how luxurious our lives are that we can complain about things like manspreading on a train or air conditioning being sexist in the workplace. And then, so we can complain, we're so living these luxury lives, complaining about men and all this. And then as soon as war breaks out, they couldn't leave. They have to fight. So it's like, that just shows how luxurious we're living today. And I think we need to kind of turn it back to remembering that everything's fragile. With one like war, with a natural disaster, gender roles will basically, it's just been proven there that they'll come roaring back in. So we should have that level of respect and understanding about how lucky we are right now before that happens.
There was a post recently about the whole proof of citizenship, and married women that had their name changed are going to have to go through extra steps in order to vote. And the post basically said a woman shouldn't have to do anything more to vote than a man. And my comment was, you know, the first time I registered to vote, I also registered for the draft. So
right. It's a big deal. Selective service. It still exists.
And when they talk about that and the women not being able to vote. They act like every man was always able to vote.
Is that
Oh yeah,
there's only
racism, slavery. Forget that. They act like every white man was able to vote. Was that
there's only
1832, the first year that all white?
Like anybody was able to vote until
yeah, exactly.
1776.
It was a
I mean,
very
like the
short period of
Constitution
time.
says, like our citizens, and then the subjects of other kings. You don't vote for kings.
Right.
I mean,
But even after 1776, the average white man waited 60 years before he could vote.
there's actually a fairly famous graphic in political science. It's like when people got the right to vote, and it's like nobody.
Nobody.
Yeah, nobody.
Time.
And this
There's like a
little
break.
thing that
Well, yeah, there's like a break for like Athens and Venice, as I'm sure you guys know, and then it's like nobody. Then it's like men. Then it's like some white men, Irish,
Wealthy
black
men.
men. Then it's like women, and then there's like 80 years where everyone can vote, and that's all of history.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great graphic.
Beautiful.
We'll
On
find
that
that
note,
and post that today.
it's exactly 10 o'clock. We've done an hour with Lisa Britton from Evie Magazine. As always, we close with words of wisdom. I usually, as the least wise member of the panel, in my own opinion, lead off. Then everyone we go around, everyone says something wise, or the least that summarizes the conversation. So we close with the guest. My own word of wisdom would take about 10 seconds. Well, that's a lie. I'm a long talker, but it would take like 30 seconds today. Basically, differences between people exist for a bunch of reasons. Tom Sowell wrote a book about this. He called it Discrimination and Disparities. But the reason that women and men do different things probably isn't that all of the men are oppressing all the women or that all the women and the men hate each other. It's that women are smaller, in many ways, slightly smarter, have different bodies and so on than men. And I think most people, everyone to go on a date or to an athletic tryout, just knew this for most of history. For 50 years, we seemed really committed to forgetting it. I'm not really sure why. Hopefully now we're moving back to normalcy. And with that, Brooks Crenshaw, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's likely the intergenerational abundance, right? These are problems of intergenerational abundance where we believe meat comes from the store and water comes from the tap and electricity comes from the switch. And, women are just as good at men at being men, something like that. And, we've seen this in the US, but it's been more pronounced in South Korea where you had women going hard left and men following them and then banking hard right. And what's going on there? And I think my hypothesis there is that men are wired to want to please women up to a point that they realize all the men are weak and there are foreign adversaries that are strong. We probably need to take care of that first. And, intergenerational abundance is typically how societies apex and wane. And so hopefully we can correct for that. That's my word of wisdom.
Beautiful. And societies, when they apex and wane, either come back or they get conquered by those foreign adversaries who usually take all the women.
Yep.
All right, Charles Love, what do you think? What is your word of wisdom, my brother?
I think that what Evie is setting out to do is really important. What people tend to forget when they focus on the extremes on Twitter, which I haven't said in a while, so I need to say Twitter's not real, so don't focus on it. Is that they get into this liberal women, liberal women, liberal women. There are plenty of them, far too many of them. But there's a segment, right? There's half the population of women. The majority of single women do lean left. That doesn't mean they're all extremely left. But we forget that most married women don't tend to be that left, right? So do they not get an outlet? I mean, are married women in their 30s sitting around reading Cosmo and being told to do all this stuff that they know is crazy? No, they need something, but they're still women. They don't want to have to read, Field and Stream. Do they still make Field and Stream? So there needs to be, there's got to be a void missing there, and it's good to fill it. I think more common sense around gender, just like around everything else, is slowly growing. And if Evie can find a way to push it out more, more power to you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, and closing with two female panelists, feminism.
Save the best for last.
Cut the bull. Yeah, that's right. Well, meritocracy, some might argue. Christy Kelly, what do you think?
Yeah, I wrote down two quick comments that you guys made that I want to kind of drill down on. Lisa, you made a really like mature kind of nuanced thing that I didn't want to let go by. Like basically that when a woman chooses to let a man lead her, like that's actually power. And women, I mean, I can imagine my young daughters just like their faces frowning up probably, but it really is something that you have to like, mature into that thought. But I did like that. And Charles, I think you are dead wrong when you
Oh,
said
because I'm a
that
pedophile?
when you said that women can have, standards and make a man, hey, dress up and kind of elevate the game and men will follow. Or maybe that
Oh,
was I think that was you
well, no, yeah, that was
or was
me.
that
No,
Will?
no, it doesn't mean that you're going to make every man do that, but your standards will make the man that's with you do it, right? Because you won't
Okay,
settle.
that's
Right.
the
You're not going to
trick.
make it. Right. So
That's the trick.
if I won't conform, I leave. What I'm saying is women are settling and then they're complaining because their boyfriend's a bum. Your boyfriend's a bum because you allowed him to be a bum.
That's true, but it's also according to demographics. So let me use when I was in California, right? There are um, men now will just either go to other races, start dating other races, or now they're leaving the country and just saying, forget these American women, the passport bros. So I think it really
Well,
is
you're missing
hard.
a part of the demographic. The demographic issue is the same issue we've been having for decades, and that's the numbers game. It's the fact that you outnumber us, and you don't want you don't want the drug addict, the homeless boy. You don't want all these, so you eliminate so many guys that
Mhm.
core guys that you would actually go out with. It's 4 to 1. So that's the issue, right?
She's
That
kind
for
of
Right.
right though, and we should let her finish. But like mass immigration, I mentioned porn, all this stuff makes it easier for guys to act like bums. That was my only point. Like both
Yes.
sexes act much more like bums now, which drives down the quality of dating. But
and
sorry,
there's
Chris.
not enough men.
And it's hard to say,
Stop locking
okay,
men up.
it's hard to say my standards if I'm a young woman is the man has to dress up. He has to take me on X amount of dates. He has to open my door because there is this many men that are willing to do it. And it seems like the young guys are just collaborating and saying, hey, you're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. Or we're just going to go out of the country.
Don't
It's just
listen to
fine.
Christy Kelly this week because many women are marrying quality men. Somehow they figure it out. Don't listen to her. Don't think you got to date the bum.
Okay, but Chrissy, is there more to your point?
My point is, I don't think it's as easy as Charles is kind of making it seem because now the men, especially the younger men, they're just not doing it. And they're choosing to now be passport bros.
Boom. If I could add one thing to that, I would say that if women were to offer some of the things women traditionally have said, like visibly say, I don't hate men, actually do domestic stuff other than have sex, I'll do that as well. Like, don't make that conditional on 100 different things. Like, be a normal partner in a relationship. That might be so unusual. You'd be able to keep a guy around and make him put his jacket on. Not you, but a lot of younger women, from what the younger dogs in my circle say. But for both sexes, like treating other people like humans and being nice would do a lot.
Mhm.
But Lisa Britton, you now, as our guest, obviously have the last word. What do you think?
Okay, well, I'll finish off with my main message that I like to share, and that's that men and women aren't meant to be rivals. We're on the same team. And I believe that if we can repair the fractured relationship between men and women today, we could solve a lot of our society's problems. So, as my tagline goes, the future isn't male or female, but the future is everyone. So, and having podcasts like this is moving that ball along. This is how we get there, is having these conversations, people like you having me on and spreading information in Evie. This is how we make the change that could save us. Because I think if we keep going this way, we're going to be doomed.
Boom. All right. Thanks
Thank
to
you.
Lisa Britton. I'll note also to Christy Kelly for making that serious point. It's harder for both sexes to date. And as always, to Charles Love, Brooks Crenshaw, and I am Will Reilly. We're closing up. Cut the bull. our Evie episode where we talked about dating. We didn't even get to touch that much on the sex issue, which you should go to the store shelves and buy of Evie. Feminism, hostility toward men, bunch of other things. We will check you next week. Thanks for watching.
To say, Patriot J, I'm saving the day. Patriot J, I'm saving the day from you commies who lame. No, you can't fuck with me. I got a country to say. God bless the US of A. Land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to say, cause I'm Patriot J and I'm saving the day.